Hi, my name is Beth Vogel. Um, I am a tissue recipient and a donor wife. My story begins before I even knew the importance of what donation meant and why there's such a need for organ, tissue, and eye donation. Um, Back in April 1997, I was beginning my career working towards my dream job of becoming a registered nurse, just like my dad. And I was working at a hospital and I injured myself while I was working. I tore everything in my left knee. I tore my muscle, my cartilage disc, and my tendons. And I needed a knee replacement, but due to my age, I was not a candidate for the surgery. So, over the next 7 years, I was in constant pain. I needed a knee brace to and crutches to walk. I was in every type of physical therapy there was. Over the next 7 years, I had 13 knee surgeries to correct my injury. In 2001, I had an allograft surgery where they used my own tissue to try and create more room in my knee, where they took a shim from my hip uh, of bone and screwed it onto the knee joint to create more room in my knee. Unfortunately, that surgery was not successful. I still had a lot of pain and um, bone on bone grinding when I tried to walk. Um, so, as one of my final options, my doctor recommended that we try using donor tissue I was because of my age, I wasn't able to have a knee replacement. I was too young. So he said this would be an alternative and it would be just the same. And if the surgery was unsuccessful, then there was a good chance that I wouldn't be able to walk anymore and would have to use a wheelchair. So I agreed to have the surgery, one, because I did not feel that being in a wheelchair was the answer. However, I did give my doctor a stipulation. Since I was getting married later that year, I told my doctor that I would do the surgery as long as I was able to wear high heels for my wedding, walk down the aisle without a knee brace, and not have any assistance and be able to dance the night away. So on April 22nd, 2004, I had my 13th and final knee surgery. Um, on that surgery, I received the kneecap from my donor. I received the cartilage disc from my donor. I received a tendon, a ligament, and a muscle graft from my donor. So while I was going through my injury and my doctor's appointments, I met Eric Vogel, who we instantly connected and became best friends. Um, we did everything together. We had similar interests. Um, he was just big, fun, and goofy, and very witty. Um, we enjoyed going to amusement parks together, and he was a big Oingo Boingo fan, and so he supported me throughout my my different surgeries. Um, he would go to my different therapies, and when I was down on myself and didn't want to push myself, he encouraged me and normally made a joke to change my mood. He was there for my surgeries and cared for me after my surgeries. During that time, Eric had noticed he was having a couple problems, and one night, um, he said he wasn't feeling well and thought he maybe had a pulled muscle in his back. So he went to take a warm shower, and still the warm shower didn't help. He started getting sicker and sicker. So we made the choice to go to the hospital. And this was in 2002. We were thinking maybe it was a kidney stone or a pulled muscle. When we got to the emergency room, they just happened to do an EKG and noticed that his EKG was abnormal. So they scheduled him for an angiogram the next morning just to rule out any heart issues. During that angiogram, um, the nurse brought out a picture of his heart and showed a blockage and said that he was going to have an angioplasty and that they were going to have to put in a stent um, to open up that blockage, and that he would then be staying the night in the hospital from there. So little did we know that it would lead to cardiac issues. We had no idea. Um, it was a big eye opener for us, especially since we were still young and still dating. Um, we let his family know, and they actually, his whole family, his mom and his older brother went and got checked just to make sure they were okay. And his mom actually ended up having 5 stents put in. So, and she had no idea. She had had a couple pains in her wrist, but she really didn't equate it to anything. She thought it was maybe arthritis. He proposed to me and we set a date. He actually picked the date. We were going to be married on October 31st, 2004. And since he was a big Danny Elfman fan, and we both loved Oingo Boingo, we decided to do a Nightmare Before Christmas themed reception. So I rehabbed and did everything I could and was able to wear heels and dance the night away and marry my best friend. Um, and we had the wedding of our dreams. It was actually on Wedding Story on TLC, and it was also in a magazine. And then a couple years later, everything was going good with my knee. In 2006, Eric started not feeling good again. So he went into his cardiologist to get checked, and his cardiologist recommended that we just go over to the hospital to take a look and schedule another angiogram. Um, Again, Eric and I thought it was just fine. He'd be great. He'd be fine because he was following his cardiac diet and he was taking his meds. Um, and we were kind of exercising, but not really. Um, During that angiogram, they found another blockage and had to put in a couple more stents. Um, so again, he had to have an angioplasty. Um, I left the hospital after visiting him and wasn't feeling well, and I found out that I was pregnant and we were going to be expecting our first child. Um, our son Kieran was born in March of 2007. So on August 6th, 2009, our lives changed forever. Um, Eric woke up not feeling well and said that he just wanted to rest. And I said, okay, just take it easy. Maybe don't go work out today. Um, he asked me to take Kieran, our son, to his mom's house to drop him off um, on my way to work. And Kieran was 2.5, and his mom babysat Kieran while I was working. So of course, I was running a little late for work, so I was kind of frustrated at the fact that he asked me to drop Kieran off, but I agreed to go and drop him off on my way to work. And then we said a quick I love you as I left the house, not knowing it would be the last time we would get to say those three special words to each other. It wasn't until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I got a frantic call from his mom saying there was something wrong and I needed to come right away, that there was something wrong with Eric, and I had to come. And I immediately dropped everything, and luckily I worked right around the corner from where she lived. Um, so as I left work, I I drove to her house, and on the way there, I was going through and trying to mentally prepare myself for what was happening. And as soon as I pulled onto her street, it hit me that I knew Eric had had a heart attack. And I asked her what had happened, and she said that he had come in and she had gone to go get Kieran and wake him up from his nap. Um, and she heard Eric cough, and then she saw him collapse on the ground. As soon as I arrived at the hospital, I went into ER, and not knowing where to go, I told them that my husband had just been brought in by ambulance. And they showed me to his room where they were working on him and giving their full efforts in saving his life. Um, Unfortunately, he was no longer responding to their efforts, and at that point, it had been about 45 minutes since I received the phone call from his mom. Um, so at that point, I had to make the hardest decision, and I told them to go ahead and stop the code. I was only 35. Kieran was 2.5. Eric was 41. We were just shy of our 5-year wedding anniversary. We had just started talking about possibly extending our family and trying to have another baby. And all of a sudden, I was a widow. I watched as the staff cleared his room. I turned to his nurse, and the only thing that I could think of in that moment was that Eric was a registered donor. He had just gotten his driver's license right after Kieran was born, and he decided to be a donor and sign up on the registry at the DMV. As soon as I informed the nurse that he was a registered donor, I actually didn't know what that entailed. I mean, Eric and I were young, and we really weren't prepared, so we didn't have a will. We hadn't really discussed the plan of what if something happens to us. When I left the hospital, I was at a loss. I was so numb. I didn't know what to do or what would come next. I kind of ignored my phone because I didn't want to deal with phone calls. I just wanted to be in that moment. I was trying to grasp what had just happened. Um, in a flash, my whole future was gone. I went and got my phone, and I noticed that my phone was full of calls from a number, and they had been calling all night long. Um, and the calls were, had started out an hour apart, and I had my voicemail was full from the same number, and the time on the call shortened as the night progressed, and I was angry at the fact that somebody was calling me in this moment, my darkest moment. Somebody was calling me and kept on calling me. So without looking at the messages, I called the number back just because I was so angry at them that they were interrupting my grief, and my world had fallen apart. I started yelling at the person on the phone, not realizing who it was until I made the connection that it was One Legacy, and they were actually calling on Eric's behalf because he was a registered donor. They were calling to begin the donation process. And I remember during that phone call, as I finally grasped what the call was about, I remember my anger shifting from being mad at the person for calling me in my moment of need to my anger shifting to myself because I didn't get that call sooner. And what if I had? Would Eric be able to help more people? Right after Eric had passed away, I got involved with um, the organization that handled Eric's donation and going through grief counseling with One Legacy. I found it to be a comfort because, again, I didn't know anybody who was a widow at 35 years old. I felt totally alone and not able to relate to others. And I was lost. And I wanted to make Eric's death a positive experience for Kieran, who was only 2.5. I didn't know what he would remember from his dad, um, but I wanted to change it for him and show Kieran how fun his dad was. Um, it wasn't until a year after Eric had passed away when I received a letter from One Legacy stating what Eric was able to donate and where his gifts went. Um, Eric was only 41 when he passed away. To this date, he's helped 64 others with his gifts of tissue, and he was also a cornea donor, which is funny because Eric was legally blind. He always had to wear his glasses or contacts. If he had took them off and held his hand up in front of his face, he couldn't even see his hand. It was blurry. So to help 2 other people with the gift of sight, I thought was remarkable, and I know he would have been proud about that because it was his wish to be a donor. So Eric's donations consisted of 54 bone grafts that were distributed over the United States. Um, they were used in sports and spine and orthopedic surgeries. Eric's tissue donations included 15 skin grafts that were used for breast cancer survivors to help with their reconstructive surgeries. His tissue donations also helped a couple of males and females with their hernia repair surgeries. When I received mine, when I received my gift from my donor, I just saw it as an end to my situation. I took it in light. I really didn't understand the whole meaning of what it was. I just knew that I wasn't going to doctor's appointments anymore weekly. I wasn't going to daily therapies or having any more knee surgeries. It wasn't until I went through the whole process with Eric um, when I realized it wasn't just an end to my situation. It was somebody's family member. It was a family that lost their loved one. And in that difficult time, they had to honor their loved one's wishes to say yes to donation. Just as I had to do that in a moment for Eric. I know that he's enriched the lives of 64 others. and they're able to have more memories with their families and experiences in their lives. So 15 years later, um, as a donor wife and a tissue recipient, I find comfort in knowing that I was able in that moment to honor Eric's wishes to be a donor and say yes and answer the phone call when I got it and go through the process. It's instead of making his death tragic and sad, it made it a positive experience for myself and Kieran. And Kieran is proud to say that his dad was a hero and has helped 64 people because we were able to answer that call. So it gave his death a purpose. And now I am at peace knowing that his legacy is living on through his recipients.